to you, O Lord.
Jesus told his disciples this parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out at dawn to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with them for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. Going out about 9 o'clock, the landowner saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, "You too, go into my vineyard, and I will give you what is just." So they went off. And he went out again around noon, and around 3 o'clock, and did likewise. Going out about 5 o'clock, the landowner found others standing around and said to them, "Why do you stand here idle all day?" They answered, "Because no one's hired us." He said to them, "You too, go into my vineyard." When it was evening, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Summon the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and ending with the first." Now when those who had started about 5 o'clock came, each received the usual daily wage. So when the first came, they thought that they would receive more, but each of them also got the usual daily wage. And on receiving it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last ones worked only for an hour, and you have made them equal to us, who bore the day's burden and the heat." The owner said to one of them, replying, "My friend, I'm not cheating you. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what is yours and go. What if I wish to give this last one the same as you? Or am I not free to do as I wish with my own money? Or are you envious because I'm so generous?" Thus, the last will be first, and the first will be last. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call to him while he's still near. The first lines of our first reading from Isaiah. This is towards the end of Isaiah. This is remember before I've told you about the three different writers of Isaiah, this is the third one, what scholars call Trito-Isaiah. Right? And this third Isaiah was written after the Babylonian exile. Okay, so the 70 years of being in Babylon, modern day Iraq, is over, and they've come back to Judea and Jerusalem, and the place is a mess. They've got to rebuild everything. And apparently some were not being so faithful to God when they came back to Jerusalem and Judea. And so our third Isaiah prophet today says, do it while you can. Seek God while you can. Because there's going to be a time when you're not going to be able to. So seek the Lord while you still can. Call to him while he's still near. Now why would we seek the Lord? Aren't we fine without him? Not millions of people do believe that. Why seek the Lord? Why reach out to him? Because as generous and as forgiving as we are capable of being, God is even more so, much more so than us. And with the whole thing I think that God is asking us to do is to call upon him, seek him out, seek out his generosity, seek out his mercy and love and compassion, and then take it and then reflect it back to a world that really, really needs it. You know how it is out there. People, us and them, we're so polarized, we're so antagonizing one another, especially during this election season. We're so divisive, and there's really no need for that. So you keep that in mind when you look at the gospel, the parable of the workers. This gospel for years has given me fits. I never liked this gospel. All right, why? Because it just doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem fair. These Johnny-come-latelys that start at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, we get a full day's wage. But as usual, I miss the point. The point is not about equity and fairness. The parable's all about justice. Let's take a deeper look at it. Look at those workers. Notice that these workers, were they trying to slough off? Were they trying to be lazy and just work for a couple hours or half a day? No. The problem was, they said, no one hired us. There was no work for us to do. All right? In this story, when Jesus was telling this story in his time and place, the people could really, really identify with him. Because most of the people in Jesus' time were daily workers. And daily workers got paid at the end of the day. And so if you worked, you know you're going to have dinner that night. If you worked, you knew that your family would have something on the table that night. But if you didn't work, then you got to scrounge. And you may not have dinner or food on the table that night. So this is a very, very poignant parable for the people of his time. Okay, and so we see these workers that come in, and then it's time to pay, and the ones who just worked an hour or two, they're getting a full day's wage, and their eyes probably popped, and so probably did all the workers. Say, all right, if they're getting that, we're going to get even more, and they all get the same. Oh, why give? What gives there? Why is that? It's not fair. It's not right. It's a parable, first of all, so remember that, right? And the parable is to bring home a theological truth, a point about how God is. All right? Notice that the owner of the vineyard does not pay the workers what they earned, or for how long they worked for. He doesn't do that. He pays them because out of what they need. They need food on the table. They need to eat. So when he gives them a daily wage, all right, whether they work a full day or not, that's not the important thing. God is represented by the owner of this parable, all right? So what does Jesus try to tell us? God is saying, I'm going to give you what you need. I'm going to give you love. I'm going to give you mercy. I'm going to give you compassion. And what I want you to do is to take those gifts and be generous with them. Give it back. What do we call it now? Paying it forward, right? Just to go out and be generous with others. I don't know if you heard about a man by the name of Jonathan Edwards. A brilliant man. He lived in the 1700s. All right. He was the third president of Princeton University. Brilliant. He graduated from Yale at the age of 17. All right. The year after he graduated, he wrote a theological treatise on metaphysical theology. He was like 18 years old writing this. All right. I don't know if you know what metaphysical theology is, but it also has to do with existentialism and why things exist and how God is role and all that. Very heady stuff. I can tell you one thing. When I was 18, I was not thinking about that kind of stuff. But he was. And then when he was 19, he wrote a treatise on atomic theory, atoms. Now this is 200 years before Einstein. Albert Einstein actually used some of Jonathan Edwards' theories to build on, his own theory of physical relativity. All right, so this guy is very bright. He's also was after that, those two things, he dabbles into medicine, in the medical world. All right, so Jonathan Edwards was no slacker, but his main love was God. And he was a preacher. And he preached in a lot of, Protestant churches. He was very, very puritanical. You know what I mean? He was very like those fire and brimstone. You're going to hell if you don't shape up, and just would warn the people week after week after week about, their sinfulness and just blasting them away with fire and brimstone. And it got him into trouble. Some places booted him out of the church and he had to go from one church to another. But just a brilliant, brilliant man. But most people knew him because of his fire and brimstone and just very, very strict and stern, theology and way of life. Many, many people had no idea of how generous and compassionate Jonathan Edwards was. In fact, one year, when he was president of Princeton, he took a whole year's salary. All right, that's a lot. A whole year's salary, and he used it to pay off, to buy a black woman who was a slave. He buys her and says, okay, you're free. And then the week after that, he gets up on his pulpit and he tells the people, this is what I just did. I set this person free. We all should be doing this. We all should be owning other people. Well, he got booted out. Then, the cool thing about Jonathan Edwards, he always went for the underdog, the African Americans and the Native Americans. He spent a lot of time with the Mohican tribe. And with the Mohicans, he would befriend them. He'd have them come over to his house for dinner, meet his wife and kids. Much to the consternation of his neighbors. His neighbors thought, what are you doing with these savages? And he said, no, these are good people.
They're here before we were. They're all colonists. This is 1700s. This is before our country was even founded. All right? And so he just would, root for these tribes, these Native American tribes that were really hurting. Eventually, he wound himself up with a tribe that I'd never heard of before in my life until studying his life. It's called the Housatonic tribe. Housatonic. They lived in what is now New Jersey, along these two rivers that go through northern and central New Jersey. And he loved those people. And he spent a lot of time with them. Not only just telling them about God, but telling them about his ideas of medicine and science and physics and everything. And remember, at this time, this is when smallpox was really a pandemic in the United States. All right? And the Native Americans had no immunity whatsoever to the smallpox virus. And so his buddies, his friends, Jonathan Edwards' friends, this tribe, the Housatonic tribe, was losing people by the thousands because of the smallpox. So Edwards said, I gotta do something. Otherwise they're gonna be wiped off the planet. And so he starts working with a medical team, and they do all kinds of research, and they work on what they think is gonna be a vaccine that would wipe out smallpox. Now remember, this is the 1700s. There's no scientific research, there's no computers, there's no technology, there's no lab tests, there's no blind testing, and all that stuff. This is pioneer work. And so they think they got this vaccine ready, and they say, okay, let's get some Native Americans and try it. And Jonathan Edwards said, no, we don't know if this is safe or not. This could kill them. I'm not going to risk them. He said, do me. Let me be the first one. And all the people at Princeton were like, are you crazy? You're the president of the university. We need you here. You're a brilliant mind. We can't afford to lose you. He said, no. If it's going to work, it's going to work on me first, and then we'll give it to them. I'm not going to put those folks in any more danger. They probably won't even trust you anyways, the way you've treated them. And so Jonathan Edwards won that argument. So he gets inoculated, and 9 days later he's dead. March 22nd, 1758. He dies from the inoculation of that smallpox virus. And the day before he died, he told his daughter, he said, whatever I have, give it to the tribes. Give it to them. Talk about taking the generosity of knowing his faith in God and sharing it and spreading it. That's what we're called to do, to take that generous spirit of God and reflect it right back to the people in this world that is crazy, in this world that needs it so badly. Let me tell you one more little story. Once upon a time, there was a little mouse, and the mouse was in town, and he saw all these trucks coming in, and then the trucks unload all this stuff, and they're building tents. It was a carnival. Carnival is coming to town. And so the mouse is very curious. He says, I'm going to go see what this is all about. And so the mouse goes into one of the tents, and guess which tent he went into? The House of Mirrors. And he goes in there, and all of a sudden he sees all kinds of mice in there, all smiling and all happy. He says, this is a great place. I found a happy place with all mice just like me, and they're so happy and joyful. I got to tell others about it. So the mouse leaves, he goes under the tent, and he finds another mouse who was not in such a good mood. He was kind of in a grumpy, bad mood that day. And he tells the grumpy mouse, go in that tent. Go in that tent. You're going to love it. It's going to make your day. And the grumpy mouse says, nothing's going to make my day. I've had a terrible day. Why should I go in there? And the first mouse says, well, you're just not going to regret it. You're going to love it. It's going to be the best thing to happen to you. So the second mouse goes in there, grumpy, scowling. And he gets into that tent, and he gets into that tent of mirrors, and what does he see but the hundreds and hundreds of ugly, mean mice scowling right at him, looking at him like he's just awful and mean and horrible. And then he starts cursing the first mouse, and why did I listen to him? Why did I go in here? And he gets out of there as soon as he could. What the mouse didn't realize was that the world, like a house of mirrors, reflects right back whatever you give it. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call to him while he is still near. so that we can reflect back to the world God's love, God's generosity, God's compassion and mercy. Amen.